Let's talk about the behavioral aspect of rape as a crime, keeping the Bengal rape in mind.
I think the behavioral aspects also differ, like the one we saw at Nirbhaya, and you have to brutalize, torture the woman, her body, her mind, and that is what is, giving the offender more pleasure than, before. That is what I see has drastically changed in the last 25 years.
So brutality, in a way, is sort of a reaction to that inability to deal with women.
Yeah, and to bring things under control. From our society and most societies, you were taught to keep women under control, subjugate them. That is the only way you do that. When you cannot do that, when you find, inadequate, it's a threat to your identity. And many men do that just in order to stay in control, to feel that they are in control. That's what they are doing right now more and more.
What are those potential traits that one should look out for? They say, okay, you're getting detached, or you're getting too violent, or you're very sort of transactional in your interpersonal relationship. Are there such traits?
Yeah, there are always, you see pre-indicators, right, which, you notice in people, which are indicators of violence. One of the pre-indicators is a high level of, detachment and withdrawal from others, not engaging with others. The other you see is having, broken down bonds, and the other person saying that he or she is queer.
It's been nearly 15 years since we did this Mind Over Rapist story,
Sure.
which was a cover in India Today, and it was read and appreciated by all. It helped them understand the crime.
Sure.
And it's not like a reaction kind of a thing, but a deeper understanding of the crime. And now, 15 years later, we would be discussing broadly the same issues.
Okay.
But before we start doing that, I would like to talk about your wife, Nidhi, who's also a crime psychologist.
She's a clinical psychologist.
And so please talk about her and her role in your overall, pursuits.
I think when we started working, we were working together because a lot of survivors were women and children, and very often they felt comfortable talking to women about their issues. So we worked with a large range of crimes. So she was helpful in that. So we worked as a team. We still do. So whenever there are cases where women and children are required to be interviewed, assessed, or given therapeutic help, she's the one who's helping me with that.
Now this Bengal rape issue is in the papers, and there've been so many other. Something happened in Harper, and every day we hear about it. I mean, the figures are astounding, and given, despite the fact that crime like rape is very less reported in India.
Yeah.
So, I mean, looking at these crimes, I mean, let's talk about the behavioral aspect of rape as a crime, keeping the Bengal rape in mind.
I think the behavioral aspects also differ. But one thing that we notice more and more in that is that it is becoming more heinous. Like earlier, it was simply a penetration. But now what we see is that brutality and violence, like the one we saw at Nirbhaya. And I noticed it when I started working. I mean, from in the last 25 years, an average sexual assault case, and I'm calling rape sexual assault because to me that term is more comprehensive. The average sexual assault has turned to be more heinous. There is brutality much more on the woman's body than what was there earlier. When I started work, I did not see it that much. But it is as if the penetration itself is not enough. You have to brutalize, torture the woman, her body, her mind. And that is what is, giving the offender more pleasure than, before. That is what I see has drastically changed in the last 25 years.
And also now it is seen that women are coming out in this particular case. She was a doctor, she was a working woman. In so many other instances, call centers, women are working out, coming late, commuting, traveling. They're empowered, they're leading a life. I mean, gender disparities are reducing. And But this nature of heinous crime or the sexual crime is intensifying. Do you think there's a correlation? Because one would expect that if a woman is empowered, probably these kind of things is taken care of.
As women became more and more empowered, remember there is also a reverse side to that many men, the patriarchal nature of the society is also changing. Men, what they thought of themselves as empowered, are getting less and less empowered now. They don't know how to relate to the new woman. They find, dealing with the new woman very complex, very difficult. They grow in the family where women are subjugated. And when they come out and they see that, women are independent, they are autonomous, behaving themselves, they simply don't know how to go ahead and deal with such women. So I find that in therapy, a lot of men come over and say that, privately, that they feel ashamed that they cannot deal with the new woman. So that is what I see changing for both, for men and women.
So brutality, in a way, is sort of a reaction to that inability to deal with women.
Yeah, and to bring things under control. From our society and most societies, we were taught to keep women under control, subjugate them. That is the only way you do that. Subjugation is both subtle and obvious. When you cannot do that, when you find inadequate, it's a threat to your identity. And many men do that just in order to stay in control, to feel that they are in control. That's what they are doing right now more and more.
But talking of the West, say for instance, their gender parity has been there longer, so to say. They have been, experiencing this a little longer. But do you think that I don't feel that their such a brutal expression of dominance or power has been the case?
In America, rapes are often brutal. Europe also, I think, majority of rapes are still, brutal. And I think what we are seeing more and more in India is that, many more brutal rapes are taking place than they took place before. So this brutality aspect, that is something that we do see changing all over the world. And we are seeing it in India because there is a sharp rise in that, which was not there so earlier.
So that's a very, very important point. So when men don't learn, when they lose control, or when they seek control, is when they lose control.
Exactly. You can say that.
And now, of course, technology has sort of penetrated into our lives in a way that we can't even fathom. I'm thinking of a project or doing a mind of a young adult because you're absolutely oblivious as to what's happening to people who are growing, because this screen is with their window to the world and they're hooked onto it. Of course, there are benefits to it, but the flip side, there are disadvantages as well. Say, for instance, a lot of teenagers get exposed to the kind of content, say pornography or explicit content, which perhaps they're not able to deal with. And so would you like to talk about, these aspects as well in terms of how society is shaping up with an overarching influence of technology?
Yeah, I think I can, talk of it longitudinally. 25, 30 years back, when pornography was there, I used to see many couples using pornography to enhance their pleasure. It was something mutual. But as with digitalization and the spread of the internet technology, right now, less and less couples do that. In fact, what we see is that more deviants, more people with, aberrant personality disorders use pornography. And secondly, what has happened with pornography right now is that many people see that as reality. It is taking away the intimacy from their lives. Like, for example, earlier, 25, 30 years back, pornography, when people used to use it, they used to talk of it, their intimacy being enhanced in the process. It was mutual. It is no longer mutual. Today, what you see is a single man or a single woman watching pornography and very often taking that to be reality, the sexual act I mean, people don't behave like that in real life. And that is leading to a lot of inner conflicts and doubts. Because when you see people coming with marital discords or traumas, they talk about that, hey, this does not match. So, okay, what is your reference point, right? 25 years back, it was Masters and Johnson. Today, it is pornography. Or she doesn't behave like this, or he doesn't behave like that, right? The pornography has becoming the reference point by which we define sexuality. And that is a deeply aberrant thing, and it is leading to a lot of people having problems and issues. It is the problem with intimacy, creating intimacy, that is missing. The bond attachment that sexuality led to is no longer happening because of pornography.
And if we look at pornography as a industry, the kind of things, of course, aberrant sex behavior is kinky, but also there is a lot of violence.
Sure.
Objectification of partner,
Sure.
or group sex, or this whole gender role, of course, is most insignificant in pornography.
Sure.
And this whole objectification that another human being is an object of pleasure,
Sure.
has caused a certain kind of attitudinal change towards the fellow beings.
Sure.
Which,
Very much.
Which of course reflects in such heinous crimes.
Sure.
So would you like to expand on it, and how does the nature of pornography, not just the explicitness, but the violence, the subjugation, the BDSM, and all those, there are clubs and institutions because people seek pleasure, and conventional sex is no more pleasurable, or the people sort of outgrow it.
Yeah.
And with context today, what kind of a psychology does such exposure to pornography do?
As I said earlier, sexuality was part of forming a bond, enhancing, deepening the bond. It is no longer taking place, right? It has in fact become a substitute for a bond. Very often, that's what we see. We see many violent offenders today who watch pornography, and it is something that is almost becomes a causative factor for them to go ahead and commit the crime. 25, 30 years back, we did not see it so much. Like, pornography, watching pornographic material leading as a causative factor in causing sexual violence was not there. Today, almost, I would say, 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3 sexual offenders, they say that they felt guided, motivated after watching pornography to go ahead and commit the crime, right? So it is, becoming a etiological factor in terms of causing increased violence.
I mean, that's a very significant point, that pornography may be a causative factor, or is a causative factor in so many cases of sexual violence. Which brings into a very interesting question, and I don't know how you're going to deal with it. See, we all are exposed to pornography in some measure there.
Sure.
And if it's a causative factor, am I, through my unbridled exposure, creating traits in me that can lead to potential sexual violence?
Yes, because many youngsters today, while growing up, do not, they are getting more and more detached. They are not forming bonds the way the earlier generation formed bonds, right? So when you watched pornography, it was something, you watched it in secret. It was something which was a supplementary factor in bonding. Bonding was primary, right? We learned to bond. We did not learn to detach. But the average teenager today or young adult is a far more detached person than what he was or she was 20 years back. So therefore, it is leading to, unfortunately, that aspect. Pornography itself is not the cause. I'm not saying that. But what is happening is that it is taking the place of detachment. A detached person seeing that takes it as a reality and takes it as his primary way of perceiving the world. There is no one to correct him. There is no self-discovery. There is no way that, what you call, how intimacy and sexual currents merge together in adulthood and lead to, what we call mature human sexuality, where intimacy is a part of, going ahead and having sex, right? That is no longer there. I was having a group in Tihar jails some time back with sexual offenders. right? And one of them asked me a question that, sir, do you give flowers to your wife? I said, yes, of course, I give flowers to her. I do give flowers to her. So, and then they said, sir, we find such acts very meaningless, very stupid. We don't see any purpose in that in terms of, going ahead and having sex with a person. So sex has become something totally biological. And, that is happening because of detachment in society. So I'm not blaming pornography for it. I want to make that very clear. But increased detachment and not having a bond is causing that process.
I mean, given that we work together so often, one of the things that you pointed out was that, now you say, well, the intimacy part is missing.
Yeah.
In fact, people first got intimate and then explored sexuality. Now they explore sexuality and see if they get intimate or not in the process. And rape, correct me if I'm wrong, is about inflicting power. The offender is so powerful that seeking consent becomes redundant, or it's not required because the power equations are highly skewed in favor.
Not required.
Yes. Yeah. So, again, coming back to the internet, and I'm not specifically talking about pornography, but generally internet, in the way people are exposed, in the way they're growing up seeing images where manifestation of power rather than manifestation of intimacy or emotions sort of take precedence,
Right.
So, and rape is sex without consent, and consent is not required when power play happens. So how does we link this whole, especially for the younger generation, kids who are in the reformative years, teenagers, when they expose to such a thing, how does this power equation play on internet sort of shapes their behavior?
It shapes their perception also. It makes everything very relative. Like if you see earlier, values were fixed, right? But if you see with today's generation, values have become relative. If it feels good, it is good, right? Our generation and your generation, we did not feel it so much that if it just feels good, it is good, right? We saw there were values that we were taught, there were values that we lived by. But the present one, the values have become completely relative. We only see it as terms of, okay, just a feeling. If it feels good for me to hit you, I will hit you, right? So that kind of threshold or barrier that existed, digitalization has actually taken that away very much. And that is something that causes concern. When I teach my students, many of them say, sir, if it feels good, it should be good, no? I said, no, it is not, right? Just because you feel like hitting someone doesn't mean you go ahead and hit someone. If you just feel like having sex, no. Develop the process, right? Like, for example, if you see whole of literature, it is full of wooing, getting to know people, understanding people, and sexuality to be a part of it. That is completely, missing right now, as I see more and more in the younger generation. There is increased detachment.
And that's, of course, as you said, is a reason of concern. Now, especially for the younger lot, since you're teaching them, you're a professor, like we would get to know there are certain traits, like societal traits, and people know, okay, watch out, this person has these traits. Is there a way of discerning, or perhaps you can, which when they say, I don't want to say that person who has these traits will end up raping someone, but what are those kind of things, even in a very introspective way, if you were to look at, you say, oh my God, this is not a good tendency in me, I should watch it. So would you say, well, what are those potential traits that one should look out for? They say, okay, you're getting detached, or you're getting too violent, or you're very sort of transactional in your interpersonal relationship. Are there such traits?
Yeah, there are always, you see pre-indicators, right, which, you notice in people, which are indicators of violence. One of the pre-indicators is a high level of, detachment and withdrawal from others, not engaging with others. The other you see is having, broken down bonds, and the other person saying that he or she is queer. Many students come and talk to me. They say, sir, can I take just 1 minute of your time? That is never 1 minute. That always becomes 1 hour, 2 hours, and out comes a whole story. of feeling detached, feeling lonely. And then suddenly in their life something happens, a very high intensity, high frequency thing which they are not able to handle. So then, they get extremely disturbed and they want to talk. So the role for teacher right now, or say, is also to identify these pre-indicators in people. Like, for example, in USA, a teacher has to have pre-indicators of when a person turns to violence, right? Like, for example, my niece, who's a teacher in USA, she has to regularly see that, okay, which person is capable of mass shooting. And she says, this is not what I trained for. I trained to teach, right? But yes, we are the first responders also in many ways. So a teacher, by and large, needs to know a couple of good pre-indicators to see that this person is at risk. And so therefore, such trainings are very necessary in schools to identify children, students who may commit suicide, children who may become impulsive, who may break boundaries, who are at risk. So the teacher cannot just brush it away anymore, and that has increased, right? In my career, I have, for example, last year, 2 students committed suicide, right? And because it was a, huge class, I had felt that the teacher who was in charge of them, she came to me later and told me that, yes, they were showing some symptoms, but I disregarded it. I said, why should I get involved? But if I realize right now that if I had got involved, I would have been able to prevent that. So pre-indicators are there right now.
Yeah, and teachers have a major role to play. Perhaps the government will also take note of it and create committees within schools to monitor such tendencies.
Teachers are first responders, and a student today will not go to his family and tell a problem. They will come to the teacher. So therefore, teachers need to be also sensitive to do that.
And now, the final question, what should parents do? Like, for instance, you have a daughter, and a lot of people face this problem because, of course, like you said, there's an element of detachment. They have their own set of world and they deal with it, and everybody seems preoccupied with something or the other. So what should parents do, in a situation like this? And a lot of kids are rebellious, and they want their own space, they want their own time, they want to do things their own way.
I think parents need to have far more therapeutic, psychological knowledge than what was there 50 years or 25 years ago. They need to understand the needs of the children. They need to stop imposing their values and beliefs on the children. And they need to see children as independent human beings. Like in our society, a parent very often says, "Mera ladka hai, meri ladki hai." You see children as extensions of yourself. They are not. They are independent beings, and they will not follow you. They should not follow you. Give them values and directions, how to grow up. But then a time comes when you also need to separate from them and move away from them. Our parents perhaps need to take a leaf, from this, aspect from other parents. It is natural for children to separate at 18. It is natural for children today to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and get to know the other sex, right? Parents need to understand that. Parents also need to understand that the children see the internet as a third family. They spend far more time on that than they spend with them. So they need, the more dialogue they have with them about such issues. Then I remember a mother, who was very bothered about her daughter's sexuality. So I said, okay, can you talk to her about it, right? She said, no, I cannot. I said, then that's the problem, that you cannot talk about it. It is not her sexuality or what she feels, that is an issue. Then another parent said that my children do not engage or interact with me the way I interacted, with my family. So I said, okay, how did you engage or interact? So he said, well, we played carom, we played Ludo, we had other games. I said, do you have those games in the family? No. I said, then go ahead, buy that, invite your children to start playing with you. You don't have it yourself. It is also your responsibility in a big way to get to know your children and what needs to be done with them. So therefore, parents need to make extra efforts today to know their children, not by probing, not by kind of infiltrating in their lives and trying secretly to know what is happening with them, but getting to know them as adults, getting to know them as autonomous human beings.
Yeah, which is quite actually paradoxical. At one level, parents and elders are aware that internet may have certain kind of effect which is sort of destabilizing.
Sure.
But at the same time, they need to be given a certain space so that they sort of nurture as independent individuals. It was absolutely heartening to have this conversation with you, and I'm sure a lot of parents would get benefit. And we in the society need to monitor, was of course the society at large, but also our own proclivities. And being aware would, I think, help mitigate a lot of these problems, including sexual violence.
Sure, I'm absolutely sure of that.
Right. Absolutely a pleasure, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
ऐसी ही दिलचस्प और महत्वपूर्ण हेल्थ इश्यूज के बारे में जानकारी प्राप्त करने के लिए देखते रहिए हेल्थ मंत्रा।